Day. In line with the vision of our chairman, Shri Gautam Adani Ji, CRF has been set up to carry out in-depth research on critical issues and topics that are essential in India's path to a Vikasit Bharat. It has been a year of CRF defining its mission and laying its foundation. Before I invite this evening's chief guest to the podium, we have a short video that gives a brief insight into what CRF is all about. Can we please have the video?
Guided by the vision of Mr. Gautam Adani Ji, Chintan Research Foundation is committed to carrying on evidence-based research that fosters people-centric development. As India is poised towards an era of growth and development, it needs entities that project India's growth story and the strides made in economic development and poverty alleviation. At the Chintan Research Foundation, we believe evidence-based policy research emanating from deep reflection and a shared sense of purpose. The vision of Viksit Bharat at 2047 with the data-driven insights and pushing for a global south perspective. It is an evolving journey to find solutions that foster inclusive progress and sustainable transformation in areas ranging from climate to economy, from energy to trade, from strategy to sustainability. We don't just study the present, we learn from the past as we prepare for the future. To policymakers we say, we are your partners in the journey of transformation. To our industry partners we say that we will help carry your voice to ensure that policies reflect the concerns of the private sector. CRF's work is anchored around three centers of excellence. On climate change and energy transition, where sustainability meets just transition. On economy and trade, where industry drives the narrative. And on geopolitics and strategic studies, where we want to help shape India's voice on the world stage. India's growth story is not just about statistics. It's about its people, its industries, and importantly, the ideas powering transformation. CRF convenes frequent high-level events hosting policymakers, diplomats, researchers, industry leaders, and scholars. These events bring diverse voices together. They provide a forum for discussions, for looking at out-of-the-box solutions, leading to impactful policy recommendations. Our team has produced over 100 publications, including research papers, issue briefs, and opinion columns, covering a wide range of policy topics and issues. These reflect our commitment to timely, relevant, and actionable research that informs and inspires. Real change can be only brought about by effective communication. CRF is committed to bringing research to life, ensuring that it reaches policymakers, businesses, and citizens alike. Sharing our publications and podcasts will ensure our findings spread knowledge and help turn complex ideas into actionable insights. Guided by the spirit of Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, that the world is one family, CRF stands for cooperation, collaboration, ethical research, and independent thinking. India is not just participating in global change, we are getting ready to lead it. Let's shape that journey together with reflection, with resolve, and with Chintan.
Video, while encapsulating the spirit of CRF, has also set the right background to welcome our chief guest here on stage.
Thank you, Khan. Is this fine? Thanks. Good evening, Pranav Bhai. Good evening, Karan Bhai. My friend and batchmate, Amitabh Kant, ambassadors, high commissioners, other diplomatic dignitaries. Pleasure to see many friends here. Colleagues from the bureaucracy, thank you so much for coming.
intellectual doyens from other think tanks, and senior representatives from media, ladies and gentlemen, genuinely delighted, genuinely touched to welcome you all and to see you all here for the first Foundation Day of Chintan Research Foundation, CRF, a think tank born out of Mr. Gautam Adani's vision that the future will not be shaped by the loudest voices, but it will be shaped by those who are willing to ask the hardest questions. And I think that's exactly the vision with which we have tried to establish CRF. We knew that the journey would be a long one. We knew that it would be challenging, but we also knew that in the end it would be very satisfying. So, sir, we started about a year ago, and we took the first step, like our country had taken on the 14th of August many decades ago, except instead of a tryst with destiny, as the then Prime Minister had said we had our first tryst with the Registrar of Societies. And trust me, it was a long tryst. We had literally stepped into the unknown, perhaps like Vasco da Gama did. But we didn't find spices. What we found was bureaucratic forms in the triplicate. We happily filled them. We happily did all that was required to be done, but soon got all our regulatory approvals. And trust me, the regulatory approvals did fall into place quickly. It was then we thought of starting to hire. So we hired, obviously, who's the most easiest to hire, a set of interns. And very soon, from one, that was me, we became 4. The minute we had 3 interns, we'd become 4, so that was a rise of about 400%. And yet, as you know, we did not have an office. Obviously, we didn't have an office, but we had some people. We had a small team of 4. And guess what? That's when I discovered cafes that only young interns know. Because those were the cafes where we were having our staff meetings. So it was a wonderful journey. Trust me, it was a wonderful journey because very soon these 2 or 3 young interns that we have, and they're all here, they actually very soon started doubling up as my designers, as my planners, as my researchers, and above all, whenever I was feeling low, as my moral boosters. So thank you to all of them who joined me that first day. But very soon, we had our first analyst, then we had our first fellow, and then we had our first center head, who's also here, and then obviously our distinguished fellows. Why I bow my head to them is because many of them signed on to the dotted line without even knowing where we will be sitting. We didn't have an office then, but yet they were all happy to sign on and agreed to join us simply because of the vision that we wanted them to share as CRF. Then we started looking for office space. We identified it, signed the agreement, and then, trust me, we found out who really controls construction in Delhi, the AQI levels. Because you are told to start and the next day you're told to stop. So for about, I think for about 3 months, we were in that start and stop mode till we finally moved into our office in April of this year. But not for 1 minute during that period was there any form of despair. Why? Because I had the wisdom and reach of the gentleman who's on the podium, Pranav Bhai, with me. And no matter at what time or day and night I would call him or ask him or bring about a problem to him, Pranav Bhai always had a solution. And not just that he had a solution with a smile. So thank you for that, Pranav Bhai. Thank you so much for that. But very early in this journey of setting up a think tank, and I know I have a few people from other think tanks here present in the room who've gone through this similar journey, but very early in this journey, friends, I started finding that think tank or setting up a think tank was like a bit like parenting. Why was it a bit like parenting? Because there was lots of planning to do. There were clearly sleepless nights. Above all, there was lots of advice. But there was no user manual. There was no one who could tell you how to set up a think tank. But like parenting, I must say too, each step in setting up CRF was full of joy and happiness. We were really happy. Because, you know, when your first op-ed appears in print, and trust me, I can't even probably convey how happy we all felt in the team when the first op-ed appears in print, followed closely by the first article that gets published, our first event, and the gradual evolution of our website. We celebrated each of these milestones like it was a Nobel Prize. We were so happy, we were delighted. It was a young team which celebrated every milestone with happiness. In fact, I must tell you, when our website was up, we probably used to refresh it about 10 times a day. We just, you know, and if we posted something and we found that the likes on what we had posted went up to double digits, that was all our ambition, just to cross 10. We would be delighted. So what if 4 of those likes were from us and 3 were from bots? We still were happy. We said, sir, we've crossed double figures. So there we were. But seriously, but more seriously, at CRF, there's one thing we tried to imbibe from day one. And that is that the most challenging paths will lead to the most rewarding destinations. Again, something I'd learned from my association with Mr. Adani over the 1 year that I spent before we started this, that genuinely you must look for the most toughest path, not the most easiest. Which is why we are looking to place CRF at the confluence of 3 issues that we feel not only shape our present, but will define our future too. First, climate change. Now, we want to see within climate change how countries like India can also achieve their zero net emission goals without compromising their developmental aspirations. After all, 2047 comes before 2070. And we must not lose sight what we owe to the country and to the people, while again, not in any way diluting our climate change aspirations. So that's our one vertical. The second vertical was global economy and trade. After all, if I've spent 20 years in the WTO in Geneva, I need to have global trade as one of the verticals. But again, seriously, as India moves steadily towards its Viksit Bharat 2047 vision, there is a need to reimagine economic governance that supports self-reliance and inclusive prosperity. Very importantly, in this growth that we envision for the country, the private sector has a pivotal role to play, and we in CRF want to bring that role to the fore. And the third is international relations and strategic affairs. The shifting world order, which is marked not only by conflicts, but much more, I would say, by the emergence of the global south, and I think that is something we would so want to project within the work of CRF. These are important themes, no doubt. These are very, very important themes. But what's even more important for us is that we go deep into these themes. We go really deep into these themes and assess and analyze them from a strategic and developmental point of view. We will, and I promise this, we will not shy away from confronting the hard truths, and once we've confronted them, to try and find what best possible solutions we can offer. Chintan, the name of the think tank, means reflection. Chintan is reflection, not the lazy kind that we do in hammocks, but the more kind that we probably do in offices. But we want this reflection to lead to action. The reflection must lead to action. Action that leads to meaningful change, and change that leads to people-centric development. So it's a cycle. We want Chintan to action, action to change, change to development. But most importantly, and really I want to stress this as much as I can, most importantly, we in Chintan believe that it's your focus that determines your reality. You're focused and that is your reality. Nothing, there should be no bounds to what you want to achieve, and that's what we will do. In fact, in team meetings, I've more than once said that our job is to cut through noise, is to provide clarity, even if it means occasionally ruffling a few feathers. We'll do it. But when I look around in this room, and once again, a huge thank you for all of you for being here, I see many people, genuinely, I see many people who have made this journey possible. I see ambassadors who have helped me think beyond borders. From the day I started and the day I started interacting with a lot of you, you made the vision for CRF much bigger than India. I see friends, bureaucrats, colleagues who've kept us grounded and who've kept us on the right public policy track. A lot of journalist friends, again, thank you for being here. What I admire about them is they can take a 3,000-word article, cut it to a third, and still have it trending by lunchtime. So thank you for that. Thank you so much. Fellow think tanks, or representatives of fellow think tanks, who have generously shared their wisdom, and occasionally some of their staff too, who we've taken. And finally, the academicians here, who ensure, or who have ensured intellectual rigor in our work, and with whom we have had the occasional footnote war. But you're all part of the collaborative journey we see ahead. CRF is not here to walk any road alone. We are not here to do something and project our own flag about it. We are here to be in a journey with you. So I invite you very, very sincerely to join us in this pursuit of resilient, responsible, and evidence-based research. Together, you and us are the ecosystem that will make CRF thrive. And I deliberately say will. It's in the future because today, even though it is a commemorative day, the journey lies ahead. What do we want to do ahead? One, we want to host bigger and bolder conversations in Delhi, across India, and on the global stage. Two, we want to publish ideas that challenge the status quo, because we want to generate a platform where the future is not imagined as a reaction to global events, but as a proactive, strategic, and inclusive journey. Three, we also want to convene very unlikely allies, diplomats and data scientists in the same room. We want to have policymakers and poets in the same room. We want to have climate critics and gender advocates in the same room. Four, we want to build a space where thinking, Chintan, is a tool for shaping a better and more powerful, inclusive, sustainable world. But above all, we want Chintan, as it evolves, to be a catalyst for change, for innovation, and for developing an impact. Let me conclude. Let me conclude by sharing with you that this year has also been a journey of very different reactions. I'd love to have your attention with this, because when we started many months ago, trust me, and we said we are setting up this think tank, the kind of responses we got was, it won't work. There are too many think tanks already up there. In fact, there was one very dear friend, he said, either you're a born optimist or you're delusional. I happily took that as a compliment, because I'm not delusional, so therefore he's calling me an optimist. But after a few months, when we started taking some concrete steps, then the reactions were, oh, so-and-so is already working on this. Come on, guys, what are you doing new? So-and-so is already doing this. Fair enough, we still carried on with our journey. But I think the most satisfying responses have come to me in the last few days. And many of them from the same gentleman who made the earlier few comments, because this third, which I got in the last few days, was, why haven't you invited me to this dinner lunch? Well, it probably shows that we are in the first step to creating something tangible, something good. And I see all of you here, and I think that's a proof that we are in the right direction. And therefore, a big, big thank you to all of you for joining us today as we embark on this next phase of an exciting journey. Ladies and gentlemen, here's to a future that's not just sustainable, but hopefully as prosperous and equitable. Let the Chintan begin. Thank you so much.
And now invite Mr. Adani to deliver the special address. Thank you.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm privileged to be here on the first foundation day of the Chintan Research Foundation. Let me extend a special welcome to the ambassadors and senior figures from the government, the media, think tanks, and academia. The Chintan Research Foundation fulfills a very important need. For far too long, we have viewed global problems through lenses that were not ours. The narratives that define development, progress, and even crisis have often been disconnected from the lived realities of our own people. We believe it is time to change that. It is for this reason that the CRF must become a crucible for new ideas rooted in Indian realities and representing perspectives from the global south. The CRF must offer solutions that work not only in conference rooms, but in factories, farms, startups, and households across our nation. The CRF must imagine and reimagine the role that India can play in shaping the future, especially of the global south. The scale of transformation is required for India to realize the full potential and become Viksit Bharat by 2047 as envisioned by our Honorable Prime Minister. As planned, the CRF's research focuses on crucial issues like climate change, equitable energy transition, the evolving global economy, crucial supply chains and dynamic trade relations, and the overreaching geopolitics that shape the future of the world. For 3 decades now, the Adani Group has been driving growth and accelerating innovation by entering the toughest and the most critical infrastructure sectors of our nation. We see the CRF working on the same lines, entering critical areas of research, deliberation, recommendation, and impact, while upholding independence and editorial integrity. And we continue to foster the CRF as an institution where entrepreneurs and policymakers, trade negotiators and local innovators, academics and artisans all find a common cause. Here are a few objectives for us to collectively address. First, in line with India's stature as a thought leader for the world in a growing number of areas, let us collaborate deeply Among the esteemed guests today, I see representations of major Indian think tanks who have greatly contributed to our country's growth, story, and systematic development. I would very much like to see the result of all of us working with each other. This will ensure immense value addition and no duplication of work. Second, let us move beyond Delhi. India is not just one city or one region. It is a chorus of diverse voices across geographies. The time has come to be inclusive by reaching out to Ranchi and Raipur, Bhubaneswar and Bhopal, to the northeast, to the coastal areas, and to the heartlands. Our work must extend to wherever our people are. Only then can we speak with authenticity and act with legitimacy. That is why the CRF must deepen its presence across regions. Conducting ground-level research, engaging with local policy makers, and arranging events nationwide. This will help regional priorities to surface. And then our job is to bring them to nation's attention. At the same time, our ambition must also cross borders and oceans. As the global south rises, we must offer policy narratives based on our growth experience to other developing countries. The world is looking for alternatives, for partnership based on equity, for voices that have long been unheard to now become central. Let us build that global footprint with confidence. In this context, I foresee that the CRF will soon engage with the diplomatic community to ensure fruitful and impactful dialogue with other countries. Third, let us remember that policy is not abstract. It is personal. Our chairman always says that growth must be measured not just by numbers, but by the lives we touch and help to improve. This too must be CRF's mission to make a difference and to contribute to India's rise that uplifts every segment of the society. Behind every economic graph, there is a weaver in Varanasi, a woman running a dairy in Gujarat, a student coding in Bangalore, a tribal youth aspiring for a fair chance in Chhattisgarh, and many, many more. The CRF's work must ultimately matter to each one of them. With this in mind, and while extending once again a warm welcome to all the senior government functionaries, I give you an assurance that the CRF will provide you with evidence-based research and expert insights supplementing your work and offer a platform for discussions and dialogue on the most crucial issues that policymakers face, asking and answering the hard questions. Absolutely imperative for India to enter in its next glorious chapter. While I foresee a huge responsibility for the CRF, I also have the conviction that Shishirji and his entire team have the capacity to take on the responsibility and deliver on it. My message to this team is to go forth, challenge and convene and communicate. Be bold in your analysis, but braver in your dreams. May your work reflect your intelligence, but also your integrity. Not just insight, but also impact. May Chintan lead to Kriya so that reflection turns into action and ideas become instruments of real change. Thank you and Jai Hind.
Mr. Kant has been, until recently, the G20 Sherpa for India. He has been indispensable in Government of India and also as the CEO of Niti Aayog. He is not just an important sculptor of India's transformation journey, but also an avid writer on the subject.
Mr. Pranav Adani, Mr. Karan Adani, Shishir Priyadarshini, very distinguished senior colleagues of mine, the ambassadors, ladies and gentlemen. I'm truly delighted to be here, and let me first compliment the Chintan Research Foundation on completing its 1 year and on its annual day. And let me compliment the team for being a very vibrant, dynamic, young team, and that I've been through some of the research papers that have been published by the foundation, and I must compliment the Chintan Research Foundation for very detailed evidence-based research, for very data-driven work, and I particularly have found them extremely intellectually satisfying. And I think in the years to come, the Chintan Research Foundation will emerge as one of India's finest think tanks and will greatly assist and support all of us from government and the private sector to drive growth of India. Ladies and gentlemen, India is today a $4 trillion economy. The challenge is to become, as the Prime Minister has laid out, to be a $30+ trillion economy by 2047. This means that the GDP must grow over 9 times. The per capita income must grow about 8 times. The manufacturing sector must grow about 16 times during this period. And this would also mean that the country will have to grow at rates of 9 to 10% per annum, year after year, for 3 decades or more to be able to lift a very young population. Very few countries in the world have been able to do this, actually. It was done by Japan post-World War II. It was done by Korea later. And in recent times, it's been done by China, which set a scorching pace of growth for over 3 decades. I'm confident that this can be done by India because if you look at it in the last decade, India was a fragile 5 country. It's moved towards one of the top 5 countries of the world, and it's been able to do it because it's carried out very massive structural reforms in its economy. The GST, which replaced 28 taxes, cesses, it brought in IBC, it brought in RERA, it brought in ease of doing business, it brought in lowering the corporate tax rates, many structural reforms. It also pushed the limits of being a digital economy. 1.4 billion people in India have a digital identity. But more than that, today we transact over 50% of the payments, real-time fast payments in the world, because we've been able to integrate both the mobile number and the digital identity with the bank account. And everybody from a rural area to a women worker in Tier 2, Tier 3 cities, etc., all do transactions on mobile. And then you had a series of young startups, MobiKwik, Pine Lab, etc., who started providing credit on the basis of digital history. And then you had another set of young startups like Zerodha, Grow Upstock, which took stock market and wealth creation to Tier 2, Tier 3 cities. And then you had another set of young startups like GoDigit and Acco, who started providing insurance on the go, on the mobile, within 30 seconds to 1 minute. No other country in the world has been able to do this, what we do. And it's an open source, open API, globally interoperable model. And that is why the Bank of International Settlement said that India achieved in 7 years what it would have taken 50 years to achieve. That was the technological leapfrogging of India in many ways. And therefore, India built a very different alternative model from what the Western world had seen. The Western world technological innovation in the last 3 decades was driven by Amazon, it was driven by Google, it was driven by Meta, but these were all proprietary closed model, and so was it in China with Tencent and Alibaba. But India built an alternative to that with a digital public infrastructure layer and allowing private sector to compete and innovate on top of that. So India is the only country where PhonePe competes with Google Pay and Paytm competes with Amazon Pay on top. And therefore, India demonstrated its great ability to pole vault in many ways. The third thing that's happened in India is that in the last decade, we've built huge amount of infrastructure. It's a story of remarkable infrastructure building. We've built about 40 million houses, which is like building a complete Australia within India. That's more than the population of Australia, and we're building another 30 million houses. We provided toilets and sanitation to over 120 million Indians, which is more than the population of Germany. And we provided piped water connection to 253 million Indians, which is more than the population of Brazil. So the size and scale, and we've built over 77,000 kilometers of roads and expressways. This is the size and scale of what India has done in terms of infrastructure building. And if you look at it, providing electricity connection to 30 million households, again, is the size and scale of what India has done is an enormous and an incredible story of infrastructure creation. And the fourth thing that's happened in India is the story of going green. Most of us do not realize this, but India has built over 230 gigawatt of non-fossil energy. No other country has been able to do it, and we've brought down the price of renewable energy from 24 rupees, 25 rupees to just 2 rupees. And now we are taking renewable energy to crack water and produce green hydrogen with the ambition of becoming the lowest cost producer of green hydrogen, the lowest manufacturer, the cheapest manufacturer of electrolyzer, and the lowest priced exporter of green hydrogen to the rest of the world, and pushing for green energy in a very big way. No other country has demonstrated the kind of ambition and energy of going green like India has done. And India has demonstrated that net zero can be net positive and that we can do a just and inclusive growth by still being very, very positive about going green. The fifth thing that India has done is to use, in many ways, new technology, the artificial intelligence mission, the quantum computing mission, the green hydrogen mission, the semiconductor mission. All of these will drive India's growth story in the coming years. But ladies and gentlemen, if India is to become a 30+ trillion economy, as I said, many other countries have done this. But all these countries did it at a point of time when there was a relative stability of the globalization process, when there was a relative era of peace. When Japan grew, when Korea grew, when China grew, the world trade was growing and expanding. When India has to grow, you're seeing a war in Europe for the last 4 years. You're seeing a huge crisis in the Middle East, and you're seeing China saying that we'll annex Taiwan even if it requires a war. And therefore, you're going to see massive global turmoil across the world. So globalization itself, the period of stability which we've seen since post-World War II itself has come to an end. Second is that the global supply chains, the period of trade expanding, the period of global trade lifting people above the poverty line, that has ended. The global supply chains have been disrupted, and you're seeing huge tariffs being imposed against each other. And you're seeing tariffs being used as a mechanism for revenue generation. And therefore, what you are witnessing is that WTO is dead, that the distinction between developed, developing, and less developed countries has come to an end, and countries have started negotiating bilaterally. There'll be more bilateral trade, regional trade, etc. And the third is that you are seeing new productive forces of huge new productive forces of AI, quantum computing, robotics, all these will lead to a massive rise in production and productivity and transform lives of citizens. But the basic algorithms on which they are based would require some kind of an international consensus. Otherwise, they have the potential to trigger conflict among societies in due course. So these are the global challenges. India also has its own challenges. And India's own challenges are also critical for us to overcome. First and foremost, it's important to understand that India grew last year at 8.2%. This year it will grow at 7%. But India does this growth on just 50% of its population. The other 50% are very passive participants in the economy, with 46% people. Actually, the number of wage-level workers in the agriculture sector before COVID was 41%, which has gone up to 46% now. And then you have a number of people living in government subsidies, etc. So 50% of the population are passive participants in India's economy. And the government's many schemes like Mudra, etc., are aiming to make them active participants in Indian economy, and that's very critical. Once they become very active players in Indian economy, India economy will grow on a sustained basis for a long period of time. The second challenge is that our manufacturing has to grow from 16% to 25%, and we need many more large companies which can manufacture. We have very few large companies. You need about 10,000. Today you have 1,000 large companies. You need 10,000 large companies to grow, to bring the size and scale of manufacturing to penetrate global markets. Without exports, all these countries, whether Japan, Korea, China, all grew on the back of exports. And every time India has grown, it's grown on the back of exports. Without exports and penetrating global markets, it will not be possible for India to grow on a sustained basis for a long period of time. And therefore, you need large companies. You need the backward-forward linkages with MSMEs. When Maruti came in, it created its own back ecosystem of MSMEs. And therefore, without that, the MSME sector will not grow. And therefore, you need large companies. And you need to penetrate global markets. And lastly, it's very important that we focus very strongly on Human Development Index, the Physical Quality of Life Index, because no country in the world has been able to grow without improving learning outcomes, health outcomes, nutritional standards, and those are very, very critical. And the focus on Human Development Index is very critical and very important. Having given you what the global challenges are and what the domestic challenges are, let me also tell you that all these countries which grew, all had a very vibrant system of think tanks. I mean, look at, there's only one country in the world today, which has a global share of 26%, which has a market cap of almost 48%, and with just 4% of the population, and that's the United States of America. That's close to 50% of the market cap, 26% of the global GDP, with 4% of the population. So actually, if there's one beneficiary of free trade in this world, it's the United States of America. Mr. Trump may say anything, but the beneficiary has been the United States of America. And therefore, but it's been possible because it had Brookings, it had Carnegie, it had Rand Corporation, it had Peterson Institute. All of them were constantly doing evidence-based research. All of them were feeding the government with outcomes. All of them were doing hard research on the basis of data and spelling out the big picture vision. And that is what is necessary to my mind. Despite all these challenges, I'm a great believer in India, and I really believe that not merely this decade, this century is India's. And this century is India's because we have a very young demographic. Our average age is 29, America is aging, Europe has aged, China is aging, but India is very young. Even when we become 100, our average age will still be just 35. And secondly, we are the only country in the world today which is making 8 airports and about 3 metro systems every year. We are the only country which is making 30 kilometers of roads and 12 kilometers of railway lines. We're the only country which has increased the solar energy by about 12x in the last 7 years. and we are the only country which, when it does technological disruption, it impacts the lives of citizens across the global south. But ladies and gentlemen, let me tell you this, that it would require very vibrant, dynamic think tanks to really constantly push innovation. It will require dynamic think tanks to constantly push sustainability, and it will require very dynamic think tanks to constantly get government officers out of their leftist mindset. Because my belief is that all of us have grown up with rules and regulation. The British Raj was replaced by license Raj, and all of us have grown it. It's become a part of our psyche. But India can't grow without free enterprise. Without free enterprise, it will be impossible for India to grow at 9 to 10%. And that would require a change of mindset. It would require a change of breaking down rules, regulation, procedures, acts that we built over the years, dismantle them in large scale. And it would require think tanks who have the vibrancy, dynamism, and who can think out of the box, who are not status quoist, and who are based on hard research, and who are dynamic enough to tell the government that you're going wrong here. And therefore, it's good to have think tanks who can also be critical of government once in a while. I'm quite sure the government will not mind it, even if you're critical in a constructive manner. And therefore, ladies and gentlemen, I believe that this Chintan Research Foundation has a very critical, very important, and a very significant role to play. If India has to become a Viksit Bharat, if India has to become a $30+ trillion economy, if India has to raise its growth to 9% per annum year after year, it will require Chintan Research Foundation to become one of India's key foundations, a key think tank, and guide India towards this very dynamic roadmap for the future. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
Century that is India's. Going into the second year of work, CRF shall be imbibing these points and insights made by our esteemed keynote speaker much more than the successful year we are here to celebrate today. The unwavering effort, unstoppable hard work stand testimony to its firm foundation, inspiring vision, and strong principles. This journey of CRF has been compiled in our first annual report. And I now request our chief guest and Shishir sir to come together and release this report.
To listen to you. Thanks to loads of you. I mean, I will not be able to do that individually, but thank you so much to all of you. But what I want to do, really, and request is for the team CRF to please stand up, and for me and with all of you to be able to give them a big round of applause, sir. So thank you so much. Thank you so much. We promise to have you all over here on the 19th of June, 2026 again, if not many times in between. But for tonight, this is a wonderful conclusion. We have some wonderful thoughts to take back with us. But before you go back, please do join us for dinner. And we have a copy of our annual report waiting for you before you leave. So once again, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much.
મિત્રો આપ યુટ્યુબ ઉપરાંત ફેસબુક, ઇન્સ્ટાગ્રામ, એક્સ સોશિયલ મીડિયાથી પણ અમારી સાથે કનેક્ટ રહી શકો છો. દેશ વિદેશના તમામ સમાચારો વાંચવા માટે અમારી વેબ પોર્ટલ revoi.in ઓપન કરશો. ધન્યવાદ.